the thing in the background's not relevant. But see, I guess what I'm asking is, do you mean like a darker tone by something like, so if I took on a kind of like tone like this, oh, versus like, oh, right? The first one might be perceived as darker despite kind of like the pitch being the same, for example. But like, I can make that dark tone even if I kind of like, take on a really weird posture like right now I'm like looking down at the ground. Or I can do the same thing if I look up at the ceiling. I can do it if I'm kind of like using a weird breathing strategy. I can do all of that kind of stuff, right? Breath support doesn't really matter so much, right? Or like, I'm not really describing vocal mechanism, right? Like, I'm not describing the difference between like, and like, right? I'm not kind of like describing that so much as like, or like, I'm not really describing that, but the dark tone I guess you could be picking up on is like, maybe this kind of gradient sort of thing, right? I don't know if that's what you're picking up on, but or like that's what you're describing as dark, but that doesn't matter what breathing position I'm in. Like, regardless of where I'm kind of like holding my body or my chest, or like whether I'm using my diaphragm, whether I'm hunched over, it doesn't really matter what configuration I'm breathing in to kind of like get to those sounds, right? So let's do a quick tour. So if I take on a kind of like voice quality like this, you can hear the pitch is slightly raised above where, I'd normally speak. The voice isn't very heavy, it's not very intense. If I was to get more intense while kind of keeping the same space, it would kind of be like that. But if I'm like, softer again, then it's like that. And the kind of like main defining feature, I guess, of this sound is that my vocal tract is like really expanded. It's kind of like yawny, there's lots of space in there. And then if I kind of like shrink that space, then it kind of gets more like this, right? So maybe that's the contrast of dark to light that you're picking up on. The other thing that I was talking about is like, right? That kind of like, quality that like opera singers sometimes use, or like that kind of thing, to get that kind of like it basically produces a boost in the output frequency in a place where instruments don't normally have a lot of harmonic information. Basically it gets louder if you kind of like take that quality sometimes, and it helps you sing stuff higher than, or like stuff like, it gives them a little bit of a punch to be overheard in scenarios where and sometimes people describe a sound quality like this as dark, right? So maybe that's what you're kind of talking about. I don't know. But the kind of like gradients I'm kind of talking about there are more determined by like what I'm doing with my vocal folds, or what I'm doing with my vocal tract, right? So like, if I have lots of space, then it's kind of darker, and if I kind of like shrink that space, then it's like not as dark. If I have like what's the word? But and obviously as you change that space, right, you can keep it in proportion, right, and kind of keep the vowel the same, right? Or you could kind of mess with that a little bit, because vowels are produced by the kind of like mix between these proportions of like space in our vocal tract, but you can kind of like shift the playing field of the vowel, like from like a dark low playing field to like a higher kind of like brighter playing field, right? By kind of like shrinking the space in your vocal tract, for example. Yeah.